Frank kept his smile steady, even when the message lit his phone like a tiny flare beneath the tablecloth. His daughter's name at the top, the words simple and sharp. Don't react. Mom is recording you. He did not blink. He did not raise his head too quickly. The clink of cutlery and the thin laugh of small talk filled the dining room as if nothing at all had changed. He was an elderly white man with careful hands and a face that had learned patience from years of sanding rough wood and teaching boys not to put their fingers near the blade. He lifted his fork, speared a piece of roast, chewed slowly, and looked around the table the way a craftsman checks a level, quiet, exact, not in a hurry. Agnes, his wife, smiled too much. Her smile sat on her face like a lid that did not fit. Lily, their daughter, kept her eyes down, and the way she slid the salt toward him felt like a message. The son-in-law talked about gas prices and office gossip, slow and careful, like a man repeating lines he had practiced. The room itself looked normal if you only glanced. If you stayed with it, little things were wrong. A picture frame on the far wall, the wedding photo, sat a touch off center, though Agnes always corrected such things. The new plastic cover on the wall socket near the buffet shone a little too white against old paint and had a hairline gap along the top edge, like a lid snapped on by someone who did not know the house. A ceramic bird had appeared on the bookshelf this week, blue and glossy, its beak pointing at the head of the table where he sat. When he lifted his glass, he saw the tiniest pinpoint reflection in the curve of its eye. Not red, not bright, but there. He kept smiling. He felt Lily's shoe press lightly against his shoe under the table, a soft warning and a promise that he was not alone. To family, he said, raising his water, and Agnes watched his mouth as if the words were a test he might fail. To family, she echoed, voice sweet, eyes cold. He set his phone palm down on his thigh and did not touch it again. He would not give any camera the clip they were trying to capture. Agnes began with small questions disguised as care. Did you take your noon pills, Frank? You know, the blue ones. He swallowed a polite mouthful and nodded. Blue at noon, white at night, same as always. She tilted her head, soft as syrup. You seemed unsure yesterday. He cut a piece of roast and spoke as if he were naming tools in a drawer. I counted them twice. Then I counted them again with the list on the fridge. He did not say the part where the blue slot had looked lighter one evening, or the way his tea had tasted a little metallic last week. He kept that to himself and let the table settle. Lily tried a laugh that sounded like a cough. Dad, do you remember Mr. Keene from the hardware store? He nodded. He kept the hard maple behind the counter. Wouldn't sell to boys who didn't know the grain. I bought your first hammer there. Lily's chin trembled just once, then went still. The son-in-law cleared his throat. Memory is a funny thing at your age, he said, faux casual, spooning potatoes. Frank looked at the man's hands, soft and quick, and pictured how a cut line runs crooked when a board is forced. It is funny, Frank said. It forgets things that do not matter. It keeps what does. He let the words hang like a plumb line. He glanced around again, slower now, the way you look for tear out after a bad pass. The floor lamp near the corner hummed faintly, a new kind of hum, a high note that did not belong to old wiring. The cord had an extra knot halfway down as if it had been untied and retied. He could smell lemon polish stronger than usual, sharp enough to tickle his nose, like someone had cleaned the surfaces they had touched. He set down his fork and folded his napkin, neat and square, buying a breath to think. Months of Agnes's gentle jabs lined up in his head like notches. You told that story already. You left the back door open. You lost the keys again. He had believed marriage turned people to habits and that her words were only boredom. Now the text from Lily turned the small notches into a plan he could see, the way blood brightens sawdust when a cut goes wrong. He decided he would not fight here. He would not raise his voice or ask questions he already knew they would answer with pretty lies. He would keep his calm and walk through the afternoon as if it were any other day. And he would look. He would mark. He would wait. Coffee? Agnes asked when the plates were moved aside. I can brew your favorite. He smiled the smile people use with strangers. Tea would be nice, he said, and he stood to follow her to the kitchen, not too close and not too far, casual, like a man wanting to stretch his legs. On the counter sat a new sugar jar and a new spoon rest, both oddly placed where they blocked the drawer he used for rubber bands. The kettle took a long time to boil, though. The burner was high. He watched steam gather against the window and catch a thin light from somewhere near the curtain rod. He stepped 1 inch to the left, and the light vanished. He stepped 1 inch to the right, and there it was again, a dust mote sparkle that did not belong to sun or lamp. He did not reach. He did not touch. He stirred his tea twice and held it to his face as if enjoying the smell, and he set the cup down without sipping. Back in the dining room, he paused by the bookshelf to admire the ceramic bird, and his breath barely fogged the glaze near its eye. The tiny fog made a dot on a dot. He smiled wider, as if he had just remembered a joke. When he sat, Lily's phone buzzed in her lap. She kept her eyes down, slid him a look that said, "Wait." He waited. He let the meal end slowly, the way you let a blade slow to a stop before you take your hands off a workpiece. He told a small story about a student who measured twice and cut once, and Agnes laughed too loud at the wrong place, and the son-in-law checked his watch, and Lily stacked plates with shaky hands and said she would do the dishes. Frank stood in the hall, as if stretching his back, and peered into the mirror by the coat hook. A dot of light blinked once from the lampshade behind his shoulder, and then held steady like a breath held in a game. He did not turn. He reached for his jacket and patted the pocket slowly, as if looking for mints, and felt the rectangle of his phone where he had put it earlier. When he could, he stepped onto the porch for air. The sky rested gray on the rooftops. A car he did not know idled 2 houses down, windows up. He leaned on the rail and counted to 60, then went back in. When the dishes were finished and the cake cut and the goodbyes said, he kissed Agnes on the cheek and thanked her for the nice lunch and walked to his room. He closed the door halfway and sat on the edge of the bed like a man who had come to the last problem in a long math. He picked up his phone. The screen woke. The number at the top hit him like a cold hand. 114 missed calls, all from Lily. He stared at it, steady, the way you look at a warped board and decide where to cut. He scrolled and saw they were spread through the previous night and the morning, attempts stacked like urgent knocks. He did not call back yet. He did not text. He let the screen go black, slid the phone into his pocket, and stood up. The house exhaled and sighed and clicked the way old houses do when people stop talking. He went to the hall, turned off the lamp with the steady blue eye, and shut the office door with a light hand as if putting a child to sleep. He breathed in. He breathed out. He made a promise to himself in plain words a child could understand. He would not be the fool at his own table. He would not give them the scene they wanted. He would keep smiling until the moment he chose, and then he would stop smiling and start building, the way he always had, one measured line at a time. Frank did not return Lily's calls right away. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and moved through the rest of the afternoon like a man walking across a floor he knew had loose boards. Careful where he put his feet. Careful where he put his words. He let Agnes talk about the neighbor's new fence and the price of eggs. He nodded at the television news and pretended to read the paper. He washed his own cup, dried it, set it upside down where it always lived, and made a small mental mark when Agnes moved it 2 inches to the left, as if testing whether he would notice. He noticed everything. He ate a light supper. He fixed himself, toast and an egg, then said he was tired and went to bed at his usual time, 9:30. He lay on his side, eyes half closed, listening to the house breathe. He counted the hallway clicks, the soft hum in the corner lamp, the new rhythm in the office down the hall, where the screen sometimes glowed after midnight. When Agnes's breathing settled into slow, even waves, he waited 10 more minutes, the way he had taught boys to wait for a saw blade to stop spinning before they reached across the table. Then he slid out from under the covers, took his socks in his hand so they would not drag on the floorboards, and moved into the hall. The office door had the same old creak, but the computer cast a gray square of light on the carpet like a silent window to a winter sky. He clicked the mouse once. The desktop woke to life. A folder sat open on the screen as if it had been there waiting for him. The name hit him in the chest, Backup FK. His initials, stripped of his first name, turned into a label like you would glue on a box of broken parts. He felt heat in his face, then cool air on his neck from the vent. He moved the cursor slowly and opened the folder. Inside were subfolders with room names and dates: kitchen 7/3 score move, hall 0702 move, bath 0625 move, bed 0705 move. He read the word move and understood its small cruelty. He was being tracked like a dot on a map, like a package. He clicked kitchen 07/3 score move. The video opened with him standing at the stove, waiting for water to boil. Agnes walked into the frame and said, "Light as sugar. You've had that kettle going a long time, Frank." The clip jumped. Now he stood staring at steam. "Did I already pour?" he asked in the cut that remained. It made him look lost. He paused, jaw tight, and then noticed a second file in the folder with the same start time but a longer length, the name ending in raw. He opened that one. In the raw file, he watched himself pour the water, set the mug down, turn to reach for the honey, and then answer when Agnes asked about the mail. No confusion, no drift. He saw the editor's knife. He saw the lie. He went file by file. In bath 0625 I score move, he found a shot of the bathroom mirror fogged around his shaving hand, and in the edited version, a cut that made it look like he put cream on twice and forgot to shave. In bed 0705 move, he counted pills into his organizer while the clock on the nightstand read 8:12 p.m. After a jump, the clock read 8:04 p.m., and his shirt was different, the kind of mistake people make when they cut and stitch a story that did not happen. He scrolled further and found a folder named Doctor with a Word document full of lines to say, repeats stories, leaves doors open, confuses names, maybe depressed. Under the Assets folder sat a PDF draft labeled Petition Temp Guardianship with sections highlighted in pale yellow. The house address, his bank, the line to be managed in his best interest. He gripped the edge of the desk until his breath evened out. He thought of his hands on younger hands, all those years telling them to check the grain, to respect the blade, to never let hurry set the pace. He did not hurry now. He opened the bottom drawer quietly, the one with old paper clips and return address labels, and found a small thumb drive in a plastic bag from a phone plan. He plugged it into the side of the machine. The drive light blinked like a silent heartbeat. He selected the backup FK folder and copied it whole. The progress bar crawled. He waited. While he waited, he set his phone to airplane mode and took 3 still photos of the screen, file names, timestamps, the petition title, the guardianship draft, with his hands steady in the dark. He did not send them anywhere. He saved them like a man tucking tools back in the box before the bell. The copy finished. He ejected the drive and slipped it into the pocket of his robe. Then he closed the main window and opened the recycling bin. Deleted there were fragments of other things, names that spoke in a flat voice. Doctor Note Draft 2, Talking Points for Lily, Memory Test Schedule, Power of Attorney Template. He restored them all to a new folder and named it Bird Shelf, a quiet nod to the blue ceramic bird in the dining room, its shiny eye and its tiny secret. He copied that folder to the thumb drive too. When the second copy ended, he found a portable hard drive in the desk, one he did not recognize, labeled in Agnes's tidy hand, Photos 2018. He plugged it in. It was not family photos. It was a full clone of the same backup FK, plus a spreadsheet called Timeline Clips with notes. July 13, tea confusion. June 25, bath repeat. July 5, pills. The spreadsheet had a column called Doctor Use and another called Share with Attorney. In the margin, a typed comment read, Make sure Lily sees gentle decline. He stood very still. Then he copied everything again to the portable drive. He knew duplicate is survival. When he finished, he opened a browser, created a new email with a name he could remember but nobody would guess, and he sent the 2 most important zipped folders to himself with a subject only he would understand. Maple Behind Counter, a private joke from the hardware store years, where truth was kept behind the counter for people who knew what it was. He closed the browser, cleared history, took a breath, and moved the mouse to the corner to put the machine to sleep. He froze when the cursor crossed an icon named Grandson Cam. He clicked. A live window showed the guest room, lit by nightlight, empty bed neatly made, camera view low and wide, like a bug's eye. He traced the angle in his head and saw the little teddy bear on the dresser with a new seam across its belly. He closed the stream and felt sick in a way anger cannot hide. He forced himself to think. Cameras need power, need a lens, need a place to hide. He sketched the house in his head the way carpenters sketch, room by room, and placed the dots on the map. The ceramic bird, the lampshade, the wall socket, the corner of the kitchen where steam collected, the teddy bear. He did not pull anything apart tonight. He had proof. He needed to keep it and to keep himself steady for what came next. On his way out, he opened the desk's top drawer, found a little bottle with a pharmacy label and Agnes's name, not his. The drug was one he knew from late-night commercials, something to make people calm. The cap was dusty, but the dropper inside was clean. He set it back exactly where it had been and took a picture of it in place, the way a careful worker sands to the line and not past it. He slid into the hall and stood in the dark to listen again. Agnes turned in bed and sighed, the sound of a woman sleeping well. He put the thumb drive into the small lockbox under his own bed, the one where he kept his passport and a photo of Lily at 5 on his shoulders. He closed the box and placed his palm on it. Only then did he allow his body to tremble once, a tiny shake he let pass through him like a cold draft. He took his phone off airplane mode. The 114 missed calls sat in a column like tiny stacked pleas. He typed a short message to Lily, "I'm okay. We'll call tomorrow afternoon. Don't write back," and deleted it unsent, realizing any reply might trigger a new move on their side if they were watching the phone. He slid the phone under his pillow and lay down on his back, eyes open to the dark. He counted from 1 to 100, the way he had taught boys to calm their hands before a difficult cut. At 97, he knew what he would do at dawn. Get the evidence out of the house, get a lawyer before the story reached a doctor, and keep his mouth closed until he could speak where it mattered. He closed his eyes and thought of Mr. Keene and the hard maple behind the counter. Some things you guard because they carry weight. Some things you guard because they are true. He slept, not well, but enough. Frank did not return Lily's calls right away. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and moved through the rest of the afternoon like a man walking across a floor he knew had loose boards. Careful where he put his feet. Careful where he put his words. He let Agnes talk about the neighbor's new fence and the price of eggs. He nodded at the television news and pretended to read the paper. He washed his own cup, dried it, set it upside down where it always lived, and made a small mental mark when Agnes moved it 2 inches to the left as if testing whether he would notice. He noticed everything. He ate a light supper he fixed himself, toast and an egg, then said he was tired and went to bed at his usual time, 9:30. He lay on his side, eyes half closed, listening to the house breathe. He counted the hallway clicks, the soft hum in the corner lamp, the new rhythm in the office down the hall, where the screen sometimes glowed after midnight. When Agnes's breathing settled into slow, even waves, he waited 10 more minutes, the way he had taught boys to wait for a saw blade to stop spinning before they reached across the table. Then he slid out from under the covers, took his socks in his hand so they would not drag on the floorboards, and moved into the hall. The office door had the same old creak, but the computer cast a gray square of light on the carpet like a silent window to a winter sky. He clicked the mouse once. The desktop woke to life. A folder sat open on the screen as if it had been there waiting for him. The name hit him in the chest. Backup FK. His initials, stripped of his first name, turned into a label like you would glue on a box of broken parts. He felt heat in his face, then cool air on his neck from the vent. He moved the cursor slowly and opened the folder. Inside were subfolders with room names and dates. Kitchen 0713 score move, hall 0702 move, bath 625 move, bed 0705 move. He read the word move and understood its small cruelty. He was being tracked like a dot on a map, like a package. He clicked kitchen 0713 score move. The video opened with him standing at the stove, waiting for water to boil. Agnes walked into the frame and said, "Light as sugar. You've had that kettle going a long time, Frank." The clip jumped. Now he stood staring at steam. "Did I already pour?" he asked in the cut that remained. It made him look lost. He paused, jaw tight, and then noticed a second file in the folder with the same start time but a longer length, the name ending in raw. He opened that one. In the raw file, he watched himself pour the water, set the mug down, turn to reach for the honey, and then answer when Agnes asked about the mail. No confusion, no drift. He saw the editor's knife. He saw the lie. He went file by file. In Bath 0625 Score Move, he found a shot of the bathroom mirror fogged around his shaving hand, and, in the edited version, a cut that made it look like he put cream on twice and forgot to shave. In Bed 0705 Move, he counted pills into his organizer while the clock on the nightstand read 8:12 p.m. After a jump, the clock read 8:04 p.m., and his shirt was different, the kind of mistake people make when they cut and stitch a story that did not happen. He scrolled further and found a folder named Doctor with a Word document full of lines to say, repeats stories, leaves doors open, confuses names, may be depressed. Under the Assets folder sat a PDF draft labeled Petition Temp Guardianship, with sections highlighted in pale yellow. The house address. His bank. The line, to be managed in his best interest. He gripped the edge of the desk until his breath evened out. He thought of his hands on younger hands all those years, telling them to check the grain, to respect the blade, to never let hurry set the pace. He did not hurry now. He opened the bottom drawer quietly, the one with old paper clips and return address labels, and found a small thumb drive in a plastic bag from a phone plan. He plugged it into the side of the machine. The drive light blinked like a silent heartbeat. He selected the backup FK folder and copied it whole. The progress bar crawled. He waited. While he waited, he set his phone to airplane mode and took 3 still photos of the screen. File names, timestamps, the petition title, the guardianship draft, with his hand steady in the dark. He did not send them anywhere. He saved them like a man tucking tools back in the box before the bell. The copy finished. He ejected the drive and slipped it into the pocket of his robe. Then he closed the main window and opened the recycling bin. Deleted there were fragments of other things, names that spoke in a flat voice. Doctor Note Draft 2, Talking Points for Lily, Memory Test Schedule, Power of Attorney Template. He restored them all to a new folder and named it Bird Shelf, a quiet nod to the blue ceramic bird in the dining room, its shiny eye and its tiny secret. He copied that folder to the thumb drive, too. When the second copy ended, he found a portable hard drive in the desk, one he did not recognize, labeled in Agnes's tidy hand. Photos 2018. He plugged it in. It was not family photos. It was a full clone of the same backup FK, plus a spreadsheet called Timeline Clips with notes. July 13, tea confusion. June 25, bath repeat. July 5, pills. The spreadsheet had a column called Doctor Use and another called Share with Attorney. In the margin, a typed comment read, "Make sure Lily sees gentle decline." He stood very still. Then he copied everything again to the portable drive. He knew duplicate is survival. When he finished, he opened a browser, created a new email with a name he could remember, but nobody would guess, and he sent the 2 most important zipped folders to himself with a subject only he would understand. Maple behind counter. A private joke from the hardware store years, where truth was kept behind the counter for people who knew what it was. He closed the browser, cleared history, took a breath, and moved the mouse to the corner to put the machine to sleep. He froze when the cursor crossed an icon named Grandson Cam. He clicked. A live window showed the guest room, lit by nightlight, empty bed neatly made, camera view low and wide, like a bug's eye. He traced the angle in his head and saw the little teddy bear on the dresser with a new seam across its belly. He closed the stream and felt sick in a way anger cannot hide. He forced himself to think. Cameras need power, need a lens, need a place to hide. He sketched the house in his head the way carpenters sketch, room by room, and placed the dots on the map. The ceramic bird, the lampshade, the wall socket, the corner of the kitchen where steam collected, the teddy bear. He did not pull anything apart tonight. He had proof. He needed to keep it, and to keep himself steady for what came next. On his way out, he opened the desk's top drawer, found a little bottle with a pharmacy label and Agnes's name, not his. The drug was one he knew from late-night commercials, something to make people calm. The cap was dusty, but the dropper inside was clean. He set it back exactly where it had been and took a picture of it in place, the way a careful worker sands to the line and not past it. He slid into the hall and stood in the dark to listen again. Agnes turned in bed and sighed, the sound of a woman sleeping well. He put the thumb drive into the small lockbox under his own bed, the one where he kept his passport, and a photo of Lily at 5 on his shoulders. He closed the box and placed his palm on it. Only then did he allow his body to tremble once. A tiny shake he let pass through him like a cold draft. He took his phone off airplane mode. The 114 missed calls sat in a column like tiny stacked pleas. He typed a short message to Lily. "I'm okay. We'll call tomorrow afternoon. Don't write back." And deleted it unsent, realizing any reply might trigger a new move on their side if they were watching the phone. He slid the phone under his pillow and lay down on his back, eyes open to the dark. He counted from 1 to 100, the way he had taught boys to calm their hands before a difficult cut. At 97, he knew what he would do at dawn. Get the evidence out of the house, get a lawyer before the story reached a doctor, and keep his mouth closed until he could speak where it mattered. He closed his eyes and thought of Mr. Keene and the hard maple behind the counter. Some things you guard because they carry weight. Some things you guard because they are true. He slept not well, but enough. Frank kept his voice light and his hands steady as Agnes unpacked the groceries and set a new tin on the counter labeled Evening Calm. He smiled and said it sounded nice, then reached for the dish towel and wiped the island with slow, circular strokes, buying seconds. When she stepped to the pantry, he slipped the small nanny camera from his pocket, no bigger than a walnut, and nested it between the upright cookbooks, angled toward the island where mugs always landed. He pressed the button once. No light showed. He laid the towel down, opened a clean mug from the top shelf himself, and placed it on a coaster with a tiny chip he knew by touch. "Water?" Agnes asked, already lifting the kettle. "Please," he said, taking a seat where he could watch her reflection in the dark oven glass. The kitchen smelled like lemon and new cardboard. The kettle hummed. He noticed her right hand stay below the lip of the counter as her left hand reached for the tea tin. Her shoulder twitched the way people do when they look over one thing and try not to look over another. He rose as if to get cream. "I'll fetch it," she said quickly. He smiled, helpless grandfather soft. "I know where it lives," he answered, and moved to the fridge. When she turned to the door, her right hand lifted just enough for him to see the small amber bottle with a white pharmacy label and her name. 3 drops fell, quick and neat, into his mug. His heart didn't race. It flattened, like a hand pressed down on wood that wants to curl. He kept the fridge door open longer than necessary, took the cream, and set it beside his cup. Agnes stirred like a nurse. "You've had a long day," she murmured. He picked up the mug and held it under his nose as if to savor the steam. The scent was wrong, a sweet, sour tin taste on air. He set the cup down as if it were too hot, reached for a spoon, and let it clatter on the floor. "Clumsy," he said with a chuckle, bending slowly. While Agnes fetched a towel, he tipped the cup into the sink in one smooth motion, let the water rush twice, and refilled the mug from the tap to the same line the tea had made on the porcelain. He wiped the rim with a fresh paper towel, slid the towel into a zipper bag he had folded in his pocket, and set the mug back on the chipped coaster. He tasted the plain water like the best drink he'd ever had, and smiled as if the tea were perfect. Agnes watched his face the way a person watches a test. "Better?" she asked. "Soothing," he told her. They sat in the soft kitchen light and talked about nothing. She asked if his memory felt foggy, her word, with careful sympathy attached like a ribbon. He said he felt peaceful. She reached and squeezed his wrist, a pulse check disguised as affection. "Maybe an early night," she suggested. "Maybe," he agreed. When she left the room to take a call, he stood, moved like a man with sore knees, and reached behind the cookbooks to stop the camera. He slipped the SD card into his shirt pocket with the zipper bag, and his smile stayed on like a mask he chose to wear. In the living room, he pretended to doze with the news on low. Agnes hovered in the doorway twice, checking. He let his head tilt and his mouth open a little, the look of a tired old man, and he counted the seconds in his head the way you count your fingers when you cut 10 boards the same length. At 10 o'clock he rose, rinsed his tea mug again, dried it, and placed it back on the shelf. He moved to the bedroom, set the lockbox on the bedspread, and opened his laptop inside the open closet where the glow wouldn't show. He slid in the SD card and the camera file opened. Agnes standing at the counter, shoulders square, bottle low, 3 neat drops, stir, smile. He paused on the frame where the label showed her name and the drug. He took still images and labeled them with the exact time from the stove clock. He copied the entire video to the hard drive he had named Birdhouse 01, then to Socket 02, then to the thumb drive, and then to the cloud folder in his new email. He attached the stills and the clip to a short message to Miss Porter. Kitchen camera, 8:17 p.m. 3 drops added to my mug. Bottle label shows Agnes plus medication name. Mug preserved by photo and towel wipe. I did not drink. Prepared to bring cup if needed. He pressed send and felt the tiniest click of relief inside his chest. He photographed his pill organizer again, speaking the day and time in a low voice, and then sealed his medications in a small pouch and placed it in the lockbox. He slid the box back under the bed, set the laptop to sleep, and lay down on top of the covers in his clothes with socks still on, the prepaid phone under his pillow. The house settled around him, wood ticking, pipes breathing, the blue eye in the lampshade quiet for once, because he had unplugged the lamp that afternoon and left the plug sitting where it looked normal. At 6:12 a.m., his prepaid buzzed. Miss Porter's reply was short and strong. Received. We filed late. Judge set emergency review for 9:30 a.m. today. Bring SD card, mug if possible, towel in bag, and printed stills. Do not consume any food or drink she prepares. If she interferes with the items, call police at once. He wrote the time on his notepad, dressed, and carried his tote to the car before Agnes woke. He returned inside and made his own breakfast. 2 pieces of toast and a banana, left the peel in the trash as a simple sign to himself that he had eaten. Agnes came into the kitchen in her robe with a soft smile and soft words. You were restless last night, she said, opening the tea tin. He shook his head gently. Slept fine. She reached for his pill organizer. He lifted it first. I've got it, he said, and held up his phone, the lens already recording, and set each pill in his palm, naming color and dose and day, then put them back. She watched the way people watch a door close on a thing they want. You're filming everything now? She asked, light, almost amused. It helps me stay organized, he said. It helps me remember. She laughed in a way that wasn't laughter and poured her own tea. I thought we might talk to Dr. Harris, she tried. He's very kind with, transitions. I have a meeting at 9, he said, rinsing his plate. We'll talk later. He carried the mug he hadn't used, the towel in its bag, and the SD card in his pocket. In the hall, he paused at the shelf. The ceramic bird's beak had shifted again, now aimed toward the entry where his keys hung. He did not touch it. He picked up his keys, locked the door behind him, and drove away, heart calm like a lake before wind. At the courthouse steps, he met Miss Porter in a navy coat with a thin folder. She held out a hand. You did well, she said simply. We'll go in, speak plainly, and let the files speak louder. Lily waited in the hallway with a paper cup, eyes red, shoulders small. She didn't hug him. She put her hand on his forearm and kept it there until the clerk opened the door to the small hearing room. Inside, the judge looked at him over reading glasses. Miss Porter placed the SD card on the evidence table, the printed stills beside it, the towel bag labeled with time and date. We are asking for an immediate order, she said in a voice that made no apologies. No recording in bathrooms and bedrooms, no access to Mr. Keene's medications, no contact with his medical providers without his written consent, preservation of all digital evidence in the home, and a temporary injunction preventing any sale or encumbrance of the home. The judge looked at the still image where Agnes's hand hovered over the mug and the label on the bottle showed her name clear as a road sign. He nodded once, slow, and turned to Frank. Did you drink this? No, Your Honor, Frank said. I saw it on the camera after. Good, the judge replied. He signed a paper fast as a sigh. Orders granted. Sheriff will serve today. Officer will accompany you if you need to retrieve anything. We will set a full hearing soon. Until then, keep your routine simple, Mr. Keene, and do not engage. Frank thanked him and felt the weight shift from his shoulders to the paper in Miss Porter's hand. Outside the room, Lily finally hugged him like a daughter who had been holding her breath. I was so scared, she said into his coat. Me too, he answered softly, but I kept smiling when I had to. He looked at the clock on the wall, 9:47 a.m. The day had only started, but the ground under his feet felt straight and true, and the blade that had been aimed at him was now visible, which meant he could guard against it with both hands steady. Frank left the courthouse with the paper orders tucked inside a manila folder and a feeling like the ground had finally turned solid under his shoes. And he walked straight into the plan he had been building in his head for days. A simple dinner where the truth would speak for itself. He called the church office 2 blocks from home and reserved the small hall with the beige walls and the folding chairs. He stopped at the copy shop to print still images with timestamps big enough for the back row to see. And he phoned the same technician who ran slideshows for funerals and weddings, a quiet man named Miguel, who did not ask questions when Frank said, "I need the projector to show 2 videos side by side and then a screen of file details." By noon, he had a list on a yellow pad. Extension cords, HDMI cable, small speakers, table for evidence, 2 pitchers of water he would pour himself. Miss Porter called to say the sheriff would serve the emergency orders that afternoon and asked if he wanted an officer near the hall in case emotions run ahead of reason. And Frank said yes, please. 2 ushers from the church who were off-duty deputies would be enough. He went home and moved through the house like a man packing a toolbox. Deliberate and neat. He took the SD card from the kitchen camera, slipped it into a labeled envelope. Added the printed stills of Agnes's hand over the mug with her name on the bottle, the spreadsheet that said Dr. Use, the guardianship draft with his house highlighted, and a screen grab of the teddy bear's live grandson cam. He placed the envelope in his tote and set the tote by the door. At 3 o'clock, a deputy in a tan uniform handed Agnes the court papers on the porch. Frank watched from the hallway mirror as she read the lines that said no recording in bedrooms or bathrooms, no access to his medications, no contact with his medical providers without his written consent, and no changes to property. Her mouth pressed thin. Then she smiled at the deputy, like a hostess caught between casseroles, and said she understood. Frank kept his voice even when he asked, "Will you come to the church hall at 6? I want a small dinner, a reset." And Agnes answered, "Of course." Sweetness over steel, and texted relatives with fingers that did not shake. He ironed a clean shirt and set out folding chairs in 2 straight rows while Miguel tested the projector on the beige wall. They checked the first cue, Frank reading a bedtime story to his grandson. The second cue, the edited kettle confusion beside the raw pour. The third cue, metadata overlay with time codes. The fourth cue, the kitchen drops. The fifth cue, the teddy bear feed frozen on the frame that showed the lens. And the 6th cue, the guardianship PDF and the plan for if dad slips bullets. Miguel nodded each time and said, "Ready." At 6 on the dot, family arrived the way family always arrives when there is the scent of trouble. Agnes walked in with a sheet cake that read, "To New Beginnings," in blue icing. The son-in-law held a glass vase of supermarket flowers. Agnes's brother hovered in the doorway with his cap in his hands, and Lily came last, pale and firm, touching Frank's arm as if to check that he was still real. The 2 ushers stood near the back where they could see the room. Frank thanked everyone for coming and spoke in the simple language he trusted, the way he had addressed boys in his shop class when he taught them about keeping hands safe. He said he wanted to clear the air, that he had been quiet too long, that he would not argue tonight, and he hoped no one else would either, that he would simply play some home movies and then the papers would do the rest. He poured water for himself and for Lily, let Agnes pour her own, and gave Miguel a nod. The wall filled with the first image. Frank on the couch with his grandson under his arm, reading aloud, the boy laughing at the silly voice. People smiled by reflex. The second image popped up beside it. Frank at the stove, staring at steam as a jump cut made him look adrift. Before anyone could say "see," the third cue slid in and the 2 clips turned transparent with timestamps overlaid in white digits. The raw clip on the left showed the pour, the honey, the answer to a question about mail, the simple flow of an ordinary moment. The edited clip on the right skipped. The stove clock jumped backward. The shirt changed. The pour vanished. Even a person who did not know computers could see the cut. "This," Miss Porter said from the second row, standing only as high as the chair back, "is manipulated media." Agnes's smile thinned. She stood with palms open. "You're staging this to embarrass me," she said, voice breathy. Miguel tapped the 4th cue. The kitchen camera played. angled from between the cookbooks. Agnes's hand held the little amber bottle with the white pharmacy label and her name. Plabe. 3 quick drops fell into Frank's mug. Stir. Smile. A still frame froze with the label sharp enough to read from the back row. The room pulled a breath. Agnes's brother whispered, "Oh God," and covered his mouth. The son-in-law took 1 step toward the projector table and found a church usher's hand hovering near his elbow, a polite line he did not cross. Frank did not look at Agnes. He looked at the wall, the way a man looks at a board to see whether it will warp when cut. He gave Miguel another nod. The teddy bear frame filled the screen, a low angle toward the guest bed, the pinpoint lens visible in the stitched seam. Lily made a sound like a swallowed sob. The ushers exchanged a glance and walked a half step closer to the aisle. Miss Porter rose with a small folder. "A judge has already signed orders today," she said in the same even voice she had used with the judge. She read the key lines and held up the stamped copy. "Lawful recording in common areas to document events is permitted, but cameras in bedrooms and bathrooms are prohibited, and medication tampering is a crime." Agnes's mouth opened and closed. She pointed at Lily. "You've always wanted him to yourself," she snapped, then turned on Frank. "You're confused, darling. You don't remember T right." Frank lifted a hand, not to silence her, but to place his word at the center of the room. "I remember what matters," he said, steady. Miguel brought up the guardianship PDF with the house address highlighted, and then the bullets from Plan for If Dad Slips that matched Agnes's phrases from the past weeks. Repeat stories, leave doors open, foggy days, talk to doctor. The repetition on the wall made the room colder. Agnes's brother, who had set the first camera above the bookshelf months ago because his sister asked him and told him it was for safety, swallowed and spoke from the 3rd chair without lifting his head. "I helped with one," he said, voice low and ruined. "I didn't know about the pills." The son-in-law tried to move toward the laptop again, but the usher's hand settled heavy and kind on his sleeve. "Let it play," the usher said. Frank kept his hands on the back of the chair before him so no one would mistake calm for weakness. He let the last cue show the file named Timeline Clips, with the column titled Dr. Use, because he wanted even the people who did not like him to see that this was a plan, not a misunderstanding. When the wall went blank, there was no applause and no shouting, only the small sounds rooms make when people stop pretending. The shift of shoes, the click of a tongue against a dry mouth, a chair leg scraping the floor. Miss Porter turned to Agnes and spoke like a neighbor explaining a fence line. "You have been served. You must follow the order. Any violation will become part of the record and may result in arrest." Agnes lifted her chin as if taller would make her right. "You ruined this family," she said to Frank. He shook his head once. "I kept smiling while you tested me," he said. "Not loud, not cruel, just true. Now I am done with tests." He picked up the envelope with the SD card and the stills and placed it in Miss Porter's hand. Chain of custody was a phrase he had learned that day, and he respected it the way he respected a sharp blade. He thanked Miguel. He thanked the ushers, and he thanked Lily for standing up when the floor was slick. People filed out in a line that was not a parade. Agnes left last, carrying the New Beginnings cake like a prop that had lost its meaning. Her brother followed with his cap crushed in his fist. The son-in-law did not meet anyone's eyes. When the hall was empty, Frank stood in the quiet and let his shoulders drop. Just once, Lily pressed a paper napkin into his hand and laughed a little cry. "I thought they'd throw the projector," she said. "They tried," he answered, and it was almost a joke. Outside, the air had cooled. The street lamps came on. Miss Porter touched his elbow and said, "We have what we need. Keep the routine. Do not drink what you did not pour." He nodded because the sentence fit his whole life now. He locked the church door behind them, walked Lily to her car, and watched her taillights until they turned the corner. Then he drove home by the long route, calm as a man at dusk, a man who had shown his work and placed each tool back where it belonged. Frank woke the next morning to a house that sounded like it was holding its breath. And when he walked to the entry table for the newspaper, he saw a plain white envelope lying there without a stamp, without his name, as if it had grown from the wood overnight. He picked it up with 2 fingers, opened it over the tile so nothing would fall onto the rug, and slid out a single glossy photo of himself asleep, last night's book on his chest, and the lamp behind him casting the same soft cone of light he always set before closing his eyes. On the back, in neat block letters, someone had written, "You missed me." He did not curse. He held the edges and let the cold move through him like a draft that warns of a gap you can fix. He set the photo inside a clean zip bag, sealed it, and called Miss Porter on the prepaid. She told him to call the police and to touch nothing else. And then she said, "We'll attach this to the record," in the same even voice she used in court, which steadied him. 2 officers came, looked over the door frame, checked the back slider, tested the locks. There was no pry mark, no scratch, no broken latch. "Key," one said, tapping the knob with his pen, and Frank thought of the spare Agnes had kept for emergencies, and of relatives who came and went in recent weeks. He signed the report, handed over the bagged photo, and wrote the time the envelope had not been there last night, 10:15 p.m., when he had locked up. When the patrol car pulled away, he took the toolbox from the hall closet, laid his old rag on the floor, and replaced both deadbolts and the knob with the new set he had bought 2 days earlier. He mounted the keypad lock, programmed a fresh code that did not match any birthday, and tested the door 5 times with the care he gave to a final pass on a tight joint. He set motion lights on each corner of the house and placed 2 small cameras he had purchased yesterday, one aimed at the driveway, one at the back gate, both pointing outward, as Miss Porter had allowed. He made tea he brewed himself, sat at the table, and wrote the morning's events on a yellow pad in simple lines. Envelope, photo, bag, call to lawyer, police report, locks changed, cameras set. He was returning the pen to the drawer when a faint blue dot winked inside the fabric of the bedroom lampshade across the hall, small as a star seen through fog. He froze, then walked to the lamp and lifted the shade with 2 fingers. There, glued to the inner frame, sat a pinhole lens with a tiny board and a hair of wire, the kind of device you could slip into a pocket with keys. He did not yank it. He took a photo first, then unplugged the lamp from the wall, then unscrewed the bulb, then slid the shade off, then lifted the device whole and set it in a second bag so it would not shed fibers. He called the same officer, who returned with a small spectrum detector. The device chirped and pointed toward the back of the house as if the air itself were a wire. The officer followed the signal into the yard and out to the alley, where it grew stronger near the fence and then fell off toward the next block. "Could be rebroadcast," he said, frowning. He logged the bag and called a detective who knew about nanny cams that aren't for nannies. The detective arrived with a laptop and a narrow antenna, swept the frequency, and caught a handshake to a nearby access point. The registration data said the receiver belonged to a short-term rental 2 streets over leased by an LLC, with a pretty name and no website. The detective's brow lifted when he read the LLC's manager, a bookkeeping company that handled accounts for a mid-sized law firm downtown, where Frank's son-in-law sometimes helped with projects, a phrase the son-in-law liked to say to sound bigger than his job. "Interesting overlap," the detective said, dry as brick. He asked for the court orders. Frank handed over the stamped pages from yesterday. "That helps," the detective said, and left to ask a judge for a warrant. Frank ate a sandwich he made himself and waited without letting waiting eat him. He cleaned the sink, he filed his pill video for the morning, and he called Lily from the prepaid to say only, "I am fine," and to ask how she was. "Angry," she said, voice small, and relieved. He told her to drink water and to keep her phone on. At 2 p.m, the detective called back. "We're going in," he said. An hour later, Frank stood on the sidewalk across from the rental, while 2 officers carried out a plastic bin, then another, then a computer tower wrapped in a towel. The detective showed him the inventory page. 2 micro cameras, still paired to a receiver, 3 thumb drives, a handheld monitor with his bedroom paused on the screen, and a folder of printouts labeled "Dad Decline" that included still frames of his pill organizer taken through the kitchen window. The name on the lease matched the LLC. The credit card for utilities traced back to the law firm's miscellaneous expenses account. Nobody was home when they went in. "We'll follow the paper," the detective said. "You keep your routine and your notes." He slid the bagged lampshade camera back into his coat. This one goes to the lab. Frank nodded and returned home the long way around the park because he needed to walk in open air. Porter met him on the porch at 5 with new papers already drafted. A motion to expand the order to bar any third party acting on Agnes's behalf from placing devices or interfering with his home, a request to freeze access to any accounts that had paid for the equipment, and a notice to the law firm to preserve financial records. She also held a small sealed envelope from the court lab. "Preliminary test," she said when he opened it inside. The slip showed residue of a sedative on the paper towel he had used on the mug rim. "This will become part of the case," she added quietly. "We do not need to argue with anyone at dinner parties anymore." She called the detective from Frank's kitchen and put the phone on speaker so Frank could hear the alignment of steps. The lab would test the mug itself. The DA would review the report, and the expanded order would be presented to the same judge first thing in the morning. "Tonight," she told Frank when she hung up, "you stay simple. Lock the doors. Do not let anyone in. If Agnes shows up, call the police, not me." He smiled with the corners of his mouth and said he understood. After she left, the house felt different. Not because it was haunted, but because it had turned into a thing he could manage by clear rules. Lights on outside, camera angles checked, doors beeping when opened, pills filmed, water poured by his hand only. He made soup from a can, ate half, washed the bowl, and sat with the yellow pad to write the day in small facts until the page looked like a straight board. Envelope, police, locks, camera, signal, rental, warrant, bin, residue result. At 9, a car idled across the street for a minute too long, then moved on. He wrote, "Car, 902, dark sedan," then stretched his back and turned off the living room lamp. In the quiet that came, his mind tried to lurch toward a question. Why this? Why now? Why from the people who sat at his table? But he did not let it run. He brought it back to the next step. Sleep, wake, court, keep steady. At 10:30, his prepaid buzzed with Miss Porter's message. "Judge will hear expansion at 8:15 a.m. Detective confirmed rental tied to firm's account. DA interested. Good work documenting. Rest." He set the phone under the pillow like a small guard and lay on his side facing the door. He slept lightly, woke twice to the house clicking, and in one of those wakes he realized without fear that the secret had moved out of the shadows and into folders and bins and stamped papers where secrets do not live long. At dawn, he made coffee and thought of Mr. Keene and the hard maple behind the counter. How truth was always there for the person who knew to ask. He was that person now, and the asking had become a record no one could smooth away. Frank arrived at the courthouse before 8 with his manila folder, his yellow pad, and the small tote that now felt like a toolbox. He met Miss Porter at the security line, and they walked to the same small hearing room with beige walls and a clock that ticked loud enough to mark each minute. At 8:15 a.m., the judge took the bench, read the overnight filings, and granted the expanded orders without long speeches. No recording in any private area of the home by anyone. No third-party surveillance. No access to Frank's medications or medical providers, and a financial freeze on any account that had paid for cameras or software tied to his address. The judge also signed a short line that mattered more than its size. Preserve and produce all digital media created or stored by respondent or agents within 30 days. Miss Porter thanked the court and handed Frank a stamped copy. In the hallway, the detective from yesterday joined them with 2 simple updates. The lab had confirmed sedative residue on the towel and trace on the inner rim of the seized mug, and the rental's receiver logs matched timestamps from the lampshade camera. "The DA is preparing charges," he said, voice flat in a useful way. "Expect calls today." Frank nodded once. He did not feel triumph. He felt a beam settle true under weight. He went home the long way again, past the park, and stopped for bread and milk. He used the keypad to enter the house and said, "Good morning," to an empty kitchen. He made a plain breakfast, filmed his pills, and wrote the time in his notebook. At 10, the doorbell rang. 2 uniformed deputies served Agnes with the expanded order at the curb. Frank watched through the front window without hiding. She read, her mouth tightened, and she looked up at the lens of the porch camera as if she could talk it into silence. She did not come to the door. She left fast, tires bumping the gutter. 10 minutes later, the prepaid buzzed. Miss Porter's number flashed. A warrant was executed at the law firm, she said. They're collecting financial records tied to that LLC. The partner who controlled the expense account is with them. Frank wrote 1028, warrant at firm on the pad, and underlined it once. At noon, Lily arrived with sandwiches and a careful hug. She sat at the table like a person who did not want to break anything. "How are you?" she asked. "Steady," he said. She watched him pour water from the tap and smiled a small, tired smile. "I can breathe when I watch you do that," she said. He told her about the judge's orders, about the detective's call, about the DA. He did not speak cruelly about Agnes. He kept to facts. Lily nodded and slid an envelope across the table. "I didn't bring you copies before because I was scared," she said. "This is the email titled Plan for If Dad Slips with the print header and a few more forwarding traces. Miss Porter already has them in her inbox from my counsel, but I wanted you to see the paper." He placed the envelope on top of his folder without opening it. "Thank you," he said. At 1:30, his prepaid rang again. The number was the detective's. "Charges filed," the detective said. 2 counts illegal surveillance, 1 count administering a substance without consent, 1 count violation of court order, 1 count stalking. "We'll be making arrests this afternoon. Keep your door closed." Frank wrote the words carefully, each on its own line, then made tea he brewed himself and sat with Lily in the quiet. At 3, a patrol car eased past the house. At 3:15, another. He did not stand at the window. He stayed at the table and told Lily about Mr. Keen and the hard maple behind the counter, and about how some truths sit where only careful people look. The afternoon slid by in small tasks. He labeled the external drives with dates. He printed his pill photos and filed them by day. He checked the outside cameras and saved the clips to the cloud. Close to 5, Miss Porter called again with a final update for the day. Agnes had been arrested at her sister's house without incident. The law firm's partner was also in custody. The son-in-law had agreed to meet police with counsel for questioning. "You do not need to speak to any of them," she said. "If anyone tries to contact you, point to the order and hang up." She paused, softened her voice. "You did everything right." Frank thanked her. He did not cry. He stood and set a clean index card on the desk and wrote in block letters at the top, 114 missed calls. He left the card there as a small reminder about listening. In the days that followed, things moved the way heavy machines move. Slow at first, then steady. The DA added a charge when the lab report on the mug came back complete. The court scheduled a longer hearing, and then, after Miss Porter filed a motion with the new facts, signed temporary orders that made Frank the only person allowed to make decisions about his home and health. A separate court date appeared for the guardianship petition, which Miss Porter moved to dismiss with prejudice based on fraud. Frank went to an independent neuropsychological evaluation that lasted 4 hours. He answered memory questions, drew a clock, repeated numbers forward and backward, named animals, and told the doctor how many quarters are in $4. He did not try to be clever. He just did the tasks. 2 days later, the report came back clean. The doctor wrote, "No evidence of cognitive impairment," and Frank filed the paper in the front of his folder. He also called his insurance company to ask if the policy would cover a counselor. They said yes. He went to a quiet office on a side street and told a man in a sweater that fear had sat in his house like a person for weeks. The man said fear often does that, and that it leaves slowly when rooms are full of light and routine. Frank nodded and scheduled 3 more sessions. He kept filming his pills and pouring his own drinks. He let Lily shop for his groceries while the case was open. He changed the keypad code every week. He slept with the prepaid on the nightstand, not under the pillow. One afternoon, a plain envelope with no return address arrived by mail. Inside was a copy of a sale contract for his house with a woman's name on it and a date from last week. He called Miss Porter at once. She told him not to panic and reminded him the injunction had been in place before that date. Any attempted sale would be void and likely added to the list of bad acts. "We'll notify the recorder," she said, and they did. The paper never touched his title. On a Thursday, the detective called with a softer tone than before. "Search of the rental turned up a folder of printed screenshots and notes," he said. "There were photos of you and your grandson. It was intense." He did not describe them. He did not need to. "We'll be recommending a no-contact order for the child as well," he added. Frank said thank you and sat for a long minute with his hands flat on the table until his breath matched his hands again. On the next Monday, the court dismissed the guardianship petition with a short order that used the word improper. Miss Porter walked out of the hallway with a smile that reached her eyes. "You are done with that part," she said. "We continue with the criminal matter and with a civil action for privacy and defamation," she added, not as a threat, but as a plan. Frank nodded. He went home and baked chicken, the simple way with salt and pepper, and brought a plate to Lily's apartment so she would not have to cook after work. They ate on her couch with the TV low. She asked if he had thought about moving. He said yes, but not out of fear, out of choice. "A smaller place," he said, "with old trees and neighbors who wave." Over the next month, he found it. A little house on a short street with marigolds already planted in the front bed. He closed with Miss Porter sitting nearby, and he filed the deed in a folder labeled in his own hand. He kept the old house through the end of the case and then sold it himself when the papers said clean. On his first night in the new place, he taped the index card above his desk, 114 missed calls. He added a second line under it in smaller letters. Listen the first time. He still used his cameras, pointed outward. He still counted his pills out loud and kept the videos in a neat folder he hoped he would never need again. He also added new routines that were not about defense. A morning walk to the bakery for black coffee, an hour in the afternoon to sand and oil the old cutting board Lily loved, a weekly call to a neighbor who lived alone to make sure she was okay. Some evenings he sat on the porch and watched the street until the sky turned the color of a soft eraser. He did not pretend the past had been a dream. He kept his records in a box marked truth, and when fear tapped at the window like a small pebble, he looked at the stamped orders, the doctor's report, the dismissal, and the simple index card that had saved him when words failed at the table. Then he poured himself water and slept in a room that watched over him only because he had chosen where every eye pointed, including his own.